In this session, I'm going to do a quick overview of Project Praxis. When you go to the praxis.autodesk.com page, you'll notice on the far right-hand corner, you're able to sign in. You can use your standard Autodesk login ID to sign into the application. Once you're signed in, you're going to notice a very simple interface. On the far left-hand side, you're going to see what are called your workflow maps. Every single workflow map that you've generated or been a part of will be listed over here on the left-hand side. Once you go ahead and select one of these workflows, you'll notice that it'll actually prompt over on the main screen. Now the interface is an infinite space that goes left to right. So you're able to generate a space based on however large that workflow might be. The first thing you'll notice is that in the top left-hand corner, there's an option called Workflow 1. This is basically where the title of the workflow is found. Inside here, you can just simply say title of workflow. Now, you can change the title at any time, but this is what's going to be described over here in the workflow pane. So whatever you've listed here will actually show up. You'll also notice that when you look at one of the workflows, you're given a few options on the left-hand side. The first of which is an automatic save. Now, the software is automatically saving itself all the time, but if for some reason you've made a change and you need to jump out of the software very quick, by selecting the save button, you just ensure that the workflow is being saved. Now you can also copy or save as. So if you were adapting an existing workflow, using the save as feature will just allow you to go ahead and make an alteration to that. In addition to that, you have the ability to embed this workflow, so you can actually copy it in an iframe format and post it on another website, or you can provide people with just a simple link that gives you access. In addition to that, you're able to go ahead and publish this workflow. By selecting publish, you can then tag additional programs that might be shown here. When you publish it, it'll save this directly to the Autodesk Knowledge Network. And then finally, you have the ability to throw these workflows away. Now, what I'm going to start by doing is just hovering over one of these bubbles. You'll notice when you hover over these bubbles, you're given some different options. At the bottom here, you'll notice there are lots of different configurations for each one of these bubbles. I'll start by selecting the Start End bubble. You'll notice when I do that the software automatically develops these sort of arrows that go in different directions. If I go ahead and I just simply select in one of these new bubbles, you'll notice that it automatically generates a new type of configuration. Now, anytime I select on one of these, I can alter and pick one of the different options. Here are your standard options to fill out these specific bubbles. Our first one, the green, represents start and end of a workflow. The blue represents a task within a workflow. Orange represents a decision that has to be made within a workflow. And then finally, the green represents a database, or in some instances, a software that you want to describe in the workflow. You'll also notice that there's automatically these arrows that are being created. You can simply select on these arrows and hit the delete key to remove them from the generated workflow. You also have the ability to move these workflows at any point. So as an example, I can move each one of these items to its appropriate location. Now, let's say as an example, we wanted to have an activity. So what I'm going to do is in the start end, I'm going to say this is an action. So when this action occurs, it is the start of my workflow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and draw a line down to a decision. And in the decision, I'm going to ask a question. And you'll notice that when I type in the text, it automatically resizes that. Now from there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw an arrow that goes from this task to this task. And in the case of asking a question, the answer would have been yes or no. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this line and I'm going to say text, and I'm going to say yes. And I'll click on this text, and I'll say no. So when this action occurs, we need to ask ourselves a question. If the answer is yes, we need to perform task 1. If the answer is no, we'll perform task 2. So you can see that each one of these operations can somewhat be contingent on one another. Now, as an example, let's say that we wanted to go ahead and have an alternative task. So let's say the answer was maybe. There's no limit to the amount of arrows that we draw outside of here. You'll also notice that inside of this task, let's say this maybe task required us to review software options. Okay. And I'll go ahead and pull our database key down here. And I'll pull another database here and one here. And I'll delete those out. You'll notice that you also have the ability to draw multiple arrows from a single selection. So very quickly you can start designing these the way that you want. Now what's also worth pointing out is that at any time you can move this information. So I can go ahead and move it left to right. I don't entirely have to work within the grid that they've provided. Now, in the case that one of these tasks represents a very important or critical issue, one of the things that you can also do is highlight these issues. So just by selecting that task, I can go ahead and hit the highlighter key. You'll notice it'll actually highlight that specific task for me. Now, what's also nice about these tasks is that we have the ability to really drill into them. So let's say there was a special set of criteria required to do this specific task. If I go ahead and click on that, I have some additional options. One, as an example, is to edit the knowledge path. And when I do that, you'll notice that the title of that specific task is listed here, but I can also do things like, for instance, put in things that should be reviewed or checked for. View types of software. I also have the ability to do things like embed a YouTube page. So I can go ahead and embed an article for a specific task or a video that I found. In addition to YouTube, we also have the ability to go ahead and use Autodesk Screencast. So either or, we can embed those here. If instead there was a blog page or another URL link that we wanted to take a look at, we also could go ahead and just simply add an additional link to any website just by sitting here, adding link, and then entering in that URL. Now, in addition to being able to generate our specific tasks, we also have the ability to generate what are called swim lanes. So as an example, you'll notice at the top and on the left-hand side, there's a swim lane feature. And the way swim lanes work is basically they allow us to divide up the components of the tasks. So as an example, I'm going to add a swim lane there. I'll add one here. And then we'll add one here. Oh, sorry. Add one more right here. Now, what's nice is that I can also add annotations to these. Now, the way I'll do this is I'll select one of these bubbles, but instead of using one of the key-on features, what I'll do is I'll select annotation, and I'll move this so it's right on top. And I'll edit the text to say, start of process. I'll say, selecting process path. And I'll say software selection. And then I'll update our title just to give us a little bit more info. Now, in addition to being able to go ahead and generate these, a lot of users are looking for the ability to move items around very quickly within a contained group. So one of the other advantages that you have is to use what we call containers. So as an example, you can select on any object. You'll notice that you can obviously use the container feature. Containers are very simple. Once you've turned those containers on, you can resize them. And then what you can do is generate another title. So I can say software options. The benefit of this is that at any time I can select this container and move it. And everything that's in the container will also move. So the container controls everything that's inside of it. The last little thing that I like to point out is that sometimes there's notes that you want to pass along within a task. So maybe like, for instance, within review software, we want to just add a quick annotation. You also have a feature called callout. Callout's nice because, again, you can move this wherever you want and then pin the location. Then from there, you can add some basic text. Options may change. So these different features are going to allow you to generate tons of different types of workflows that really follow what you're looking to do for you and your customers. The best thing that I can say is once you've generated one of these workflows, go ahead and save it. But more importantly than that, make sure that you record your web URL. Because by selecting those web URLs, you provide users to not edit these, but instead view all the great information that you've created, including the links that you've generated to show the use of Praxis. This has been a quick overview of how the Autodesk's new Praxis solution works.